And NYPD Officer Dan Bongino. Dan, just out the gate, overall, your thoughts on what transpired yesterday and the president's response?
Well, first off, I mean, it's obvious. This was an unbelievable tragedy. I mean, you see the pictures of that car speeding down the street and people getting hit. They're too graphic to even look at. I mean, they're really horrible. But what's really sad is in a moment that should be, a collective national mourning where everybody can put the partisan politics aside, again, we're getting into this who's to blame and who's not to blame. Did Trump do this nonsense? And it's really pathetic. I mean, think about what happened after that Alexandria shooting. Every responsible conservative, Republican, and libertarian I know said the exact same thing. Although the guy who did that was a Bernie Sanders supporter, Bernie Sanders bears no responsibility for the act of a maniac. But what happened after this? You have a group of people, including some journalists, I might add, eager to jump on this and blame this on Donald Trump. I mean, are you insane? What kind of response is that to a horrific thing like what happened yesterday, when we should all be in mourning and asking ourselves collectively what happened?
And you talk about the importance of us coming together after something as horrific as this, and many members of the left criticizing the president for not coming down harder on one specific group here. And I can't help but think about when President Barack Obama was in office and we had the Black Lives Matter movement. Many of them turned quite violent. Lives were lost. He was criticized at that point for not coming down harder on that violence. Is there a double standard that exists today?
The double standard is the chasm is so big right now between the ideological left and the ideological right. And it's really the double standard that's driving the animosity between the two. Because you have people on the right that feel like no matter what they do or what they say, no matter how much they denounce violence, no matter how much they denounce racism in any form, no matter how much they denounce the harsh political rhetoric on both sides, they are still going to be blamed for the act of a maniac. Yet when this happens on the left and you see actual violence on college campuses, Antifa beating people up, what happens? It's conservatives actually running out and saying, listen, not all Democrats are responsible for this, but there are some people calling for violence. Black Lives Matter, we've had that on tape. And yet the double standard again is driving this wedge. And I think, Abby, this is important. I think this is what's alienating a large swath of middle America that's not as ideological as we think. And they're tired of being called racist and everything like that. They want nothing to do with these people,
Dan, that is a fabulous point and needs to be made this morning.
I want to ask a law enforcement question, Dan, if I can, from your Secret Service background and your NYPD background. When you look at these extremists, this nut that drives across the country, on his social media pages and other things, we know that there are going to be more of these rallies over the coming weeks, that these people are driving from across the country. From a law enforcement perspective, from a Secret Service perspective, how do you prevent one of these nuts from doing something like this?
That's a great question. And let me just say, during my time in the Secret Service, the golden rule was this. We don't stop protests, ever, unless there's an actual threat to the president or a protectee. If the public can gather in a place, so can protesters. And what they say is not the government's purview. As long as you're not inciting violence, you are free to say something, however abhorrent that something you say may be. But how do you prevent this kind of stuff? From a law enforcement perspective, it's all preoperative intelligence. You need good sources on the ground. You need to, what we used to say, kind of shake the trees in the community. And if you hear some rumblings in the background that there are people, whether they're from the left or from the right, that are there to cause violence, harm, and criminality to other people, if that's the case, they forfeited their entire right to political activism. There is no First Amendment right to beat the snot out of someone, ever, no matter what someone may tell you on either side of the political aisle. But intelligence matters.
Well said. Thanks, Dan.
Dan, we're going to leave it there. Really good to hear from you this morning.